Ukraine has welcomed a vote by US lawmakers to resume urgently needed military assistance. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says the $61 billion aid package passed by the US House gives his troops a real chance at victory on the battlefield. Zelenskyy is now urging a quick passage through the US Senate. Speaking on American television, he said the military aid sends a clear message to Moscow.
Indeed, it is so important, this support from the United States of America. And, of course, it's the support of the American people, because, of course, the political decisions depend on the public opinion. And this aid will strengthen Ukraine and send the Kremlin a powerful signal that it will not be the second Afghanistan.
And we can cross straight to DW's Nick Connolly now, who's in the Dnipro region, that's in the eastern part of Ukraine. Hi, Nick. Now, Russian forces have been making slow but very steady gains in eastern Ukraine. What is the reaction there to the news that aid should now be coming from the US?
It was a huge relief. I was in Kiev when the news came through, and you could really see people staring at their phones, calling each other, really kind of even a kind of element of shock, because lots of people had kind of given up hoping after all these months of wrangling that it would actually finally arrive. I think it is psychologically a massive deal, and also in terms of the scale of this aid. If you look at the sums, it's basically in one dollop, one tranche of aid, more than the US has given since the beginning of this war. So it is vital, it is huge, and as you know, people here in Ukraine expect, it's hopefully the first bits of this aid are going to come pretty soon.
So specifically, what kind of weapons are expected? And importantly, I mean, are they going to get to where they're needed quickly enough?
So in terms of the contents of this bill, what we're going to see arriving at the Ukrainian front lines, I think it's just about restocking ammunition. That is the first priority for the Ukrainian military. We have a situation right now where the Ukrainian army is being outgunned often by 6 or even 10 to 1, and they're having to use kamikaze drones to compensate for the lack of basic munitions. So they're hoping for those to roll across the Polish border into Ukraine pretty soon. The same goes for munitions for anti-aircraft systems. We've seen, given these delays, Ukraine able to shoot down many fewer missiles than was the case just 6 months ago. As a result, much greater damage being inflicted. And in terms of new types of equipment coming, there's been hope. There was talk in DC about ATACMS, ballistic munitions, but with a larger range than previously supplied, to be sent to Ukraine, which would really allow Ukraine to attack Russia's logistics and Russia's military installations in Crimea, in Luhansk and Donetsk, far away from the front lines, and make it that much harder for Russia to go into offensive on the front lines.
Nick, we're going to come back to you in just a moment. We're going to take a closer look at Ukraine's efforts to fortify its northern border with Russia and Belarus. So Nick, stay where you are. We'll be back with you in just a second.
Modern warfare may be high-tech, but trenches are still proving vital in Ukraine. Kiev is hoping all this will allow Ukraine's army to hold back Russian forces. President Zelenskyy says Ukraine is building 2,000 kilometers of fortifications in 3 lines. This is part of the innermost line of defense, and it's located in the Sumy region, which shares a 560-kilometer-long border with Russia. Work on defense structures began here last year, but intensified in February. The regional capital of Sumy is also encircled with defense lines. Local sources say they're confident that any surprise Russian attack would no longer break through these fortifications. We have firing positions here, so the soldiers can observe and fire on the enemy. They can also see the next line of defence that's closer to the front line. There's a shelter for vehicles and a dugout for the crew. It's made of earth, wood and reinforced concrete. Work continues around the clock. Time is of the essence, as a new Russian offensive is expected soon. Fortifications are also being built in the neighbouring Chernihiv region, not far from the Belarusian border. In February 2022, Russian troops passed through this area to march on Kiev. These structures are known as Dragon's Teeth. They're designed to slow the progress of tanks and armoured vehicles, giving the Ukrainian army more time to destroy them. Anti-tank ditches have been dug behind them, and the area around is mined. The second line of defence is less elaborate. These images show fortifications in eastern Ukraine. Here too there are anti-tank ditches, but no concrete. The outermost line of defence is built by infantry brigades. They have to build under fire. It consists of trenches and dugouts with wooden floors and is the weakest defence. The government insists that even if the army is digging in behind the current front lines, Ukraine isn't abandoning its intention to recapture territory from the Russians. But the war is in its third year. After months of stalemate, Russia has made a number of gains. Right now, defences like these may be Ukraine's best hope of keeping Russian forces at bay.
All right, and we're back now with Nick Connolly in eastern Ukraine. Now, Nick, this work to strengthen Ukraine's border and front lines has been going on for a while now, but Kyiv has recently been stepping up these efforts, hasn't it? Can you tell us why?
Well, some of this is about trying to basically avoid Russia stretching Ukraine's forces too thinly. We've had lots of veiled or less veiled hints from Moscow that they might want to attack Kharkiv. This could be a kind of false flag thing. Most recently, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, making that pretty clear over the weekend. And that would see the Ukrainian army having to send lots of manpower away from Donbass, from the eastern Ukraine, where I am now, to the north. There's also a huge border with Belarus, which is basically a Russian satellite, where there's been Russian troops since the beginning of the war. So Ukraine simply doesn't have enough people to basically, backfill all that 2,000 kilometre or so borderline with Belarus and Russia with people. So the easiest way to try and reduce the needs in manpower and boots on the ground is to build those trenches, to put mines, things that are pretty cheap in the scheme of things, using concrete, using diggers, to try and at least make it that much harder and slower if Russia does try to attack anywhere else, and to allow the Ukrainian forces to focus on the kind of active fighting here in the east of the country.
Nick, thank you so much for that. That's DW's Nick Connolly reporting from the Dnipro region in eastern Ukraine.